Today, I've got a very special guest, someone I met face-to-face in Prague as a pretty much impromptu, unplanned meeting, but we bumped into each other and had a really good chat. And I thought he'd be a great guest to have on the podcast. So welcome, Nav. It's great to have you.
It's a great pleasure to, this is actually my first podcast, so thanks for the opportunity, Gary.
It's great. Well, to your own admission, you're relatively new into Bitcoin, but really passionate about it. And when we started talking more about a bit of your background and your journey into Bitcoin, I just thought I wanted to find out more. And I'm sure a lot of the people listening will be really interested with your story. So before we kind of dive into the podcast in earnest, maybe do you want to give just a little background to yourself?
Yeah, I mean, by trade, I've been working in technology for some time now, and most recently been doing some consultancy work with some exchanges, not Bitcoin exchanges, but maybe one for the future. But yeah, that's kind of the professional career. About me, I've got married with 3 kids. They keep me really busy. No, it's great. I live in West London. Yeah, I stumbled across Bitcoin about a year ago, just actually less than a year ago. So I'm still learning. I'm no expert. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll come on to that. The thing I ask all my guests first of all is, what's their earliest memory of money?
My dad used to incentivize us to, well, it's me and my brother. Yeah, he used to incentivize us to get stuff done around the house, like washing the car. I think he used to pay me £5, which is pretty not bad, adjusted for inflation. So yeah.
So you always had a kind of work ethic. In order to get money, you had to demonstrate proof of work in order to get some from your parents. Is that how it works?
Do you know what? It depends how you're wired. I'm wired in a way that, I very much believe in kind of working, earning and saving. My brother, on the other hand, was opposite. He would work, he would avoid saving, he'd want to spend it, which, there's no good or bad. It's just the way we're all wired.
Yeah.
So
did your parents influence that at all, or was that just you were just wired a bit differently to your brother?
I probably came more from my dad and my granddad. So probably got it off them. But I think it kind of comes from kind of a more cautious stance as well. But my very nature is I'm cautious. I don't just get involved with things. Sometimes I overthink, but yeah, that's just the way I am. I like to assess situations before I get involved, before if I had to make an investment or an important decision. Yeah, it was just, I think it's a lot to do with how we are wired.
And sort of through your maybe teenage years and early adulthood, what kind of money influences and approaches did you have then?
So one thing, I mean, I got a part-time job while I was doing my education, and I highly recommend that. I've got 3 kids. The oldest one is 13. So this is something I do hope they do, because it teaches you the value of money. It teaches you that, it doesn't grow on trees, because if the parents keep handing it down to you, you'll quickly realize in the real world, you've really got to work hard for it. So I think I worked at a supermarket for a few years, and that was invaluable. So you got to really work hard. You really got to put those hours in to earn a bit of money. And yeah, what did I spend it on? As a kid, I would, I'd value that paycheck, and then we'd spend it on a gym. A lot of the money was going on a gym membership. So it was just the group of friends I had at the time. We used to enjoy going to the gym and working out. They're pretty boring, but that was my upbringing. As soon as I got a bit of money, we had a bit of freedom. It was nice to be able to, go out, grab a bite to eat, have a laugh with the friends, and go to gym.
Yeah. Yeah, sounds good to me. How did you stumble across Bitcoin then?
I have to mention, shortly after graduating, I did computer science at Brunel, and shortly after graduating, I stumbled across a few old books. It was Austrian economics, so articles, books.
When you say stumbled, Nav, what do you mean by stumbled? Because you tripped over them in the library, or?
At the time, I was reading some books written by a chap called Jim Rogers. He partnered with George Soros So I thought, okay, if he's partnered with George Soros is the guy who infamously broke the pound in the 80s. So I thought, I'm early in my career, let's read this guy's book. He's known as the adventure capitalist, and he used to travel to very many countries around the world, and he used to assess, which country is economically ripe for investment and which is not. And as I read through a couple of his books, I noticed a pattern, and what he was really looking out for was free market. So he had a certain criteria. I think he traveled more than 60 countries, and each country he's driving around in his motorcycle in his first trip. The second trip was in a car. So he's crossing borders. He's meeting border officials. He's immediately assessing, how they are they welcoming the FX exchange rate? Is there a mechanism for exchange? Because you're in another country. If there is a mechanism of exchange, what is the spread? So all of these things he's assessing the very moment he's crossing. He's not even in the country, but he's got a very powerful gauge at that border of how, whether this country is economically friendly. There were countries where he had gotten a lot of grief at the border. It was difficult for him to exchange currencies. If he did manage to exchange, he had to wait a long time. And then when he did manage to exchange, he had to deal with a horrendous spread, right? So that was at the border. As he entered the country, there were other things he would do. He would look for cash points. If there is a cash point, does it work, right? A lot of the times the cash points didn't work. They weren't functional. So yeah, and based on his kind of real life physical traveling, he'd make decisions. I'll give you an example. I think it was Botswana. He was traveling through Africa. People don't even think that Botswana may have a stock exchange, but they did. He just found the country to be, fluid, very, very frictionless in terms of entering the border, exchanging the currency. It was just, just the kind of thing he was looking for. He then realized that he had a stock market, and he managed to open an account within, it didn't take a long time at all. And this was relatively smooth from what he had experienced in a large part through all the other countries that he'd experienced. So he opened a brokerage account and invested a sum of money. And shortly after that, he was in the papers. He was appreciated for what he had done. He'd crossed the border, he'd opened an account, invested. The press were really happy. A partner of George Soros has invested in Botswana. And within a few weeks, I can't remember the exact time frame, but the market went up tenfold. And that hit me, because that basically says free markets are that's what we require for prosperity. And oftentimes in the book, Jim Rogers used to talk about the free market, and he used to quote various Austrian economics. And that's how I kind of ended up ordering a few. Sorry, it's a long-winded way, but it does tie into Bitcoin. We'll touch on that later. But
so first of all, it started off as an interesting story about an almost historical figure. And that kind of weaved you into getting books and learning about Austrian economics.
Yeah, and like this, when I picked up the book, I thought, gosh, this is going to be complicated. I haven't studied economics. I'm not going to get it. But when I started reading it, there were no equations, there were no formulas. It was just common sense, right? And then I kept looking at our current political system at the time. I think Labour were in charge, Tony Blair. And I kept reading these books, and I was looking at what the Labour Party were doing, and what the Labour Party were doing just didn't make sense. But what the Austrian economists were talking about made absolute sense. It really resonated with me. But at the end of it, I thought, maybe it's resonating with me because I'm weird, right? No one cares, right? No one knows this stuff. And when I opened my gab about, Austrian economics to friends, they would kind of, turn a blind eye. So, but it resonated with me, and, that was some time back.
So then fast forward to about a year ago then, in the intervening period, you just kind of went off the boil a bit and got back to normal life and then resurrected your interest?
Yeah, a bit busy with family. We got having kids and all that, busy with work. And then there's Bitcoin, right?
So had you heard about it much before last year? You must have done. You must have had friends, colleagues that had said, have a look at this Bitcoin, or was it crypto? How had you thought about it previously?
I'd heard about it along the way. But the circle of people I knew, no one in my circle actually went deep into Bitcoin. So it was one of those things I just had to figure out myself. You know, it was it a lot. For the most part, I thought it was a scam, and then obviously it survived a few booms and busts. I think there was one in 2017, right? And I hired this chap to work on my team, and he was young, relative. He was fresh from uni, smart guy, and he was telling me how he's into crypto, and I just sat there thinking, this guy's nuts. But anyway, let me hear his story. So he explained to me what he was doing and why he was doing it. Talked about various coins, but then he mentioned Bitcoin, and I said, okay, Bitcoin's the one I know about. All these other things I don't know, but tell me about Bitcoin. And he didn't really explain it. He didn't really kind of give me the answer to convince me that this is it. The only thing
do you think that's because he didn't know really what it was? He just realized it was just one of many cryptos that he was looking at.
People struggle to articulate things like this, right? I think it also could be people like to figure things out and then keep it to themselves, which is fine. And I think he was one of those characters. He's keeping it to himself. But he did tell me one thing. It's that these are all data points that are accumulating in my head over time, right? So one thing he said, he goes, I'm never going to sell it.
Right? Okay. So he knew what it was then. He just either couldn't articulate it,
and I
or
asked him, I said,
chose not to.
I said, why are you never going to sell it? And it's just silence. It's almost like it is difficult to explain. And now I know, right? It's one of those things you really need to probe, and you have to do the work yourself. But at the time it was that. But yeah, I kind of brushed it aside. At the time, I was more a fan of the likes of Warren Buffett, who, it's still in my mind is the GOAT. But, value investing, I read some of his books, big fan of that, but Bitcoin was always running in parallel. It was on the side, never really took it seriously. There's booms and busts. And then there was another one over COVID, right? And still, I was ignorant. It shot up. Everyone was buying something. I decided to buy some shares in Amazon, thinking that was the best thing to do. It was all right. It did okay, but Bitcoin did better, right? So yeah, that was kind of the other point during COVID. I saw these things run up, and then I felt quite bad because, felt left out. I was like, am I missing something? But then I didn't think too much into it. I thought, right, I own Amazon. It's okay. It's not the end of the world.
And at this point, your lens is more focused on the value, the fact that it's an asset, and it's you're looking at the value in fiat of this thing that you could have bought instead of Amazon or other stocks and shares, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, when I did hear anything about Bitcoin, it just kind of reminded me of gold. And then I thought to myself, why not just own gold? And also it is a relatively short period of time. We've just got, up to COVID, it was just approximately 10 years of existence. It wasn't long enough. And then I kind of made up my mind. We had zero interest rate policy coming out of the financial crisis. And I was convinced this is a zero interest rate phenomena. And then inflation started to shoot up, I think 2020, towards the end of 2021, 2022. And the central bank started panicking. They started increasing rates, and crypto collapsed. Bitcoin collapsed. And I thought, right, okay.
And there were lots of other things like China mining ban and the FTX scandal and all of those things that just made it collapse, basically.
I thought, Nav, well done for not getting involved in this rubbish. Well done. You've made the right decision, sticking to Amazon and ignoring it. So yeah, that was it. Interest rates went, I think here in the UK, we went from like 0.5% all the way up to 4.5%. And it really did bring down the crypto space. It brought down Bitcoin. It brought down a whole load of people. It was one thing I noticed though. There was a few people who owned Bitcoin. I think a lot of them lost, and I do feel for them. I hope they do make it back at some point. But there were a few people.
When you say there were people that lost, you mean they sold at a loss, or they just bought high and then when the price went down,
They lost because they bought via FTX exchange,
I see what you mean. Right.
right?
Okay.
And they lost money because they bought at the top. And as a kind of coming from a kind of value investing perspective, I just thought that was stupid. Like, if you're going to do it, buy it when it's good value. But what it was notable was there was a couple of people around that time I spoke to, and their conviction was unbelievable. Like, this thing has fallen from 60,000 to close to 15,000. And they're looking me in the eye and telling me, doesn't matter. We hold and we keep adding. And I just didn't get it. I've never met anyone invest in anything with that level of conviction. Now, these are relatively young people. These, I was beginning to notice a pattern here. There's actually a few people in the world who have this another level of conviction. I haven't seen it anywhere. It's not even in the books. Like, if something goes up and falls down, no one's lived through these, and it's happened three or four times. These booms and busts. No one has. It's very rare to find a person write about a stock or an economy, a country, and explain how they lived through 3 booms and busts, and they hodled.
Okay. So then you started to dig a bit deeper yourself?
Yeah, I mean, look, we had high interest rates. Mortgages were ridiculously cheap. Energy bills went up. It was tough. It's tough. You look around. I was looking around. It's tough for me. I was looking around. Generally, it was just a difficult time for us here in the UK. It was a real struggle. And it got me thinking. I thought, how do we get out of this? Things are just getting worse. We're blaming the war in Russia for the inflation or whatever. We were just finger pointing, right? This has gone up because of him, or because of so and so, and this is not working because of so. We're not looking at the root cause. We're not trying to address the issue. And then I think around September last year, I kept hearing about Nvidia, right, being the best performing stock in the world. Now, I did a bit of digging, and I realized it wasn't. Right? There was actually MetaPlanet and MicroStrategy. And I thought, this is really odd. Like, how can the papers be raving about Nvidia and saying it's the single best performing stock in the world and not mention MicroStrategy? So then I did a deep dive in MicroStrategy. Also, at the same time, I was aware that Bitcoin was running up again. But this run up really broke my model in my head, because we're still at high interest rates. Inflation is still there, and Bitcoin's recovering from the crash in 2022. So that for me was mind blowing. That was like a point where I said to myself, Nav, wake up. This thing is not dying. It's not going away. It's still here. Dig further. Keep learning. And I did that. So then I started listening to all these podcasts about Bitcoin. They call it's the infamous rabbit hole. I'm still stuck in it. And at the same time, I was digging deeper into MicroStrategy. And then I stumbled across this video that Michael Saylor did, where he was talking about, I think it was titled The Infamous Money Glitch. Now, as a kind of tech consultant, I'm quite fortunate because I've worked on fixed income systems. I've helped with the engineering. I've tested them. I've read the specifications. And I actually understood what Michael Saylor was talking about when he was talking about raising capital via convertible bonds and then buying Bitcoin and then using the ATM. So I was familiar with all of this, and it just clicked. I just thought, this is insane. This guy has found a loophole in the financial system, and the rest was history.
Okay. Well, that's really interesting then. So you really found Bitcoin properly by just stumbling across MicroStrategy's incredible stock performance, which kind of sent you down the rabbit hole to find out, well, what is this Bitcoin? Let's find out more about Bitcoin, because MicroStrategy wouldn't be where they are without it.
Yeah, and also at the same time, Bitcoin was rebounding, right? And it was really performing well. I think we were at 35,000, 40,000 at the time. You know, amidst high interest rates, that for me was the mind-blowing part, because, you know, it's still new, it's still being tested, this new system. It survived the test of high interest rates, and that for me was profound. So yeah, I was in overdrive. I was really digging hard to understand more about MicroStrategy, and it was mind-blowing. That was a mind-blowing journey, and I was digging hard to try and understand more about Bitcoin. And then I realized I learned a little bit about the halving mechanism, which had occurred in Q1 of 2024, and then the limited supply of 21 million coins. And then I just kind of kept digging on and learning more about it. Slowly and slowly, eventually I started to realize this is more than gold, right? This is something else. So yeah, it's incredible. It really is.
And it's interesting, so far you've mostly spoken about the financial aspects and the financial benefits of Bitcoin, and yet the 5-10 minutes we were talking in Prague, we were mostly talking about sovereignty, weren't we? And you were waxing lyrical about the links of Bitcoin to the history of the Sikh religion and the importance of gold and sovereignty there, and how aspects of that really resonated with you with Bitcoin. So maybe you want to kind of elaborate on that a bit, because I think that's, for me, that was a really interesting insight and revelation as to how those things could be linked.
Yeah, before I talk a little bit about that, it's definitely worth, I forgot to mention actually, but about 3 years ago, we did a family trip to Disney. And while we were there, my wife said to me, "Oh, my cousin lives not far from here." Yeah, she said, it's 20 minutes, right? Ended up being an hour drive, right? You know how it is with the family. So yeah, we went to this family person's house, and we met the family. They had a nice house. It was kind of around a lake near a prestigious business park in Florida, and I sat down with them. We had dinner, and we kind of started talking about finance, and he told me how he was into Bitcoin, and that was a really interesting conversation, because we started debating. I said, you know, how is it different to gold? Gold is superior. Gold has lasted. It's been around forever. But he wasn't budging. He was agreeing with me. He said, but this is digital gold, and it's actually superior to gold. But obviously we were there for a short period of time. He was kind enough to gift me some books about gold and silver, the monetary system. They were good books. And then there were just a few things he mentioned that had a lasting impression on me. And he just said, he goes, look, I asked him, I said, why did you get into Bitcoin? What was it? And he goes, it was during COVID. He wasn't happy with how the government was managing the situation, how we lost our freedom and privacy and so on and so forth. And that ultimately that pain led him to Bitcoin. And then I said, okay, it's led you to Bitcoin. What are you doing? And he goes, he's dollar cost averaging. He buys every month a little bit. And then he looked me in the eye and he goes, look, because of Bitcoin, I've got this house. I've got 2 lovely kids. I think they were 3 at the time, 4 years old, and life changing, in other words, right? And I said, okay, what's your plan for the future? He goes, I'm going to keep dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin. What was notable was this guy was the only one who was working in the family. His wife was homeschooling the kids. And I walked away from there thinking, this guy's on the Bitcoin standard. He's living the life. His wife's homeschooling 2 amazing kids, right? He's got a house. He's got a lake, right? What led him to that? It was pain, right? It was pain of what? It was pain of seeing the state abuse their powers. That was, again, you know, something that will stay with me. I messaged him a few months ago. I said, you know, I'm in the rabbit hole. And he said to me, he goes, be careful. You can lose everything, you know. I think he's just doing his job, his duty. He doesn't want to be blamed, right? If anything happens. No one knows about the future, right? But one thing he did say, he said, you know, it happens in the will of God. And I said, what? What happens in the will of God? He goes, the journey of Bitcoin. Now I do understand, you know, because you can't just stop a random person on the street and convince them to buy Bitcoin. Doesn't work like that. It just happens. And it happens at different times for different people. This, obviously, his family friend, he's a Sikh as well. He had a kind of an orthodox look, long beard, turban. And I noticed a picture. This is the first time I've met the guy, right? When we were having dinner. There's a photo of him from several years ago, before he got married. And he looked completely different in that photo. Didn't have the orthodox look. And he did mention, he goes, he stopped alcohol. He stopped messing around, right? And I didn't think much of it. At the time, I thought, yeah, it's just COVID. He got into Bitcoin, got religious, whatever. So when I went down this Bitcoin rabbit hole last year, and I started listening to these podcasts, I noticed another pattern. More and more people were talking about how Bitcoin has helped them down this spiritual journey. And that's when things really started to connect up. Right? I was really noticing a pattern here. You know, there's a lot of similarities in a lot of our, you know, the people who are getting into it. There's a lot of similarities in the journey. And then, you know, let's talk about Sikhism. So it's a new religion. It's the newest of the 7 major religions in the world. As I learned more about Bitcoin, and I'll explain here on this podcast. The key things I picked up was it's digital, like the pound, right? It's solid. You can't just print. Well, you can print. The state can print extra money, but we can't create fake money. We can't create fake coins. So it's similar to the pound in that respect as well. It's exchangeable peer to peer, which is also similar to the pound. What differentiates Bitcoin is the decentralized nature of it. What I mean by that is the Bitcoin protocol cannot be changed unless all actors in the network agree to some consensus. And that's
likely to only be good for Bitcoin, because why would people that are invested in the network want to do anything that would harm it?
Yeah. And that's unlike the pound or the dollar. Yeah. So that for me was the thing that really hit me, is its decentralized nature, and that there's limited supply. There's only 21 million, right? Which is also unlike the pound and unlike gold, because there is a lot of gold out there. It's just that it hasn't been mined, and potentially a lot more gold in you know, outer space. So, and this is where things got interesting, because I started I try my best to follow my religion, principles of Sikhism. And one thing I took away when, you know, my journey of kind of Sikhism is it is decentralized. So we had 10 gurus. The first guru initiated it. And we can call it, from the first guru to the 5th guru, you could say it was more or less a spiritual movement. And around the 1600s, so this is in India. So around the 1600s, in India, they had the Mughal Empire. The ruler at the time was Jahangir, and he was not happy with the rise of the Sikhs. And during the time of Jahangir's rule, our 5th guru was there, by the name of Guru Arjan Dev Ji. So the Mughal emperor wasn't happy with the rise of the Sikhs, the freedom that the Sikhs wanted, and that they just started to make life difficult for the Sikhs. And he was particularly against the 5th guru, and unfortunately, the 5th guru ended up being a martyr, because the emperor ordered him to be tortured. So from the 1st guru to the 5th guru, that was a spiritual movement. And then after that, the next guru was the 6th guru, Guru Har Gobind. He was the son of Guru Arjan. And what Guru Har Gobind did was remarkable. He militarized our faith. our religion. He transformed Sikhism from the spiritual movement to one that embraced both spirituality and worldly authority. He was like, okay, guys, we can't just sit around and pray. We've got to do something. This is the real world now. We're getting attacked, right? We've got a state here led by Jahangir, who's not seeing everyone equally, right? There's justice that we need to defend. So there's this concept of Miri Piri. You've got two swords. I don't know if you've seen the flags around our temples, which show two swords. One sword represents spirituality. The other sword represents, military. Our desire to defend justice. As part of the militarization and self-defense aspect, he advocated for physical fitness, for readiness of combat. He formed multiple armies, he trained them, and he led defensive battles. He didn't just sit back and say, you guys do what you want, we'll just protest, we'll just complain. This guy took action. He formed a kind of a real powerful movement that would rise up to literally defend justice against one of the most powerful, one of the most powerful empires in the whole world. So that for me was profound. And a lot of it boils down to the guru's ability to really decentralize. It sounds like it was centralized because you have this concept of a guru, a leader. But when you actually study what they did, what was their leadership style, and what did they implement? It really, what they emphasized was sovereignty, individual sovereignty. There was no element of, if you're ever in trouble, go and call the police or go to the state. It was more, if you're in trouble, deal with it. Deal with it yourself and with your community, right? And that community is everyone, not just Sikhs, everyone, the whole world. Yeah. Because that's the key principle of Sikhism. And at the time in India, under the empire, there was inequality, there was racism. It was horrible. There was torture going on. You had to pay high taxes if you didn't practice Islam, much higher, like ridiculous tax. You just economically, you can't survive, because the emperor's goal, the end motive for the emperor was to force conversion. So anyway, look, that's the Mughal Empire. There were some good rulers as well who really got on with our gurus as well. Our gurus were also close friends with some of the Islamic prophets as well. So it's a fascinating history. I don't want to go, I think I don't want to go too much into it. But the point I'm trying to make is, there's a solid element of decentralization. And then the 10th Guru was Guru Gobind Singh. He also had trouble with the emperor at the time, who was called Aurangzeb, who again was up to a lot of mischief. He had ill motives and ill intentions towards the Sikhs and the Hindus. And Guru Gobind Singh Ji formulated the Khalsa, and that was pure decentralization. He got five people that he called the five beloved ones. And he said, you will represent. He didn't call one person. He's got 5 people. And he said, it's not going to be 5 people forever. It's going to be 5 people anywhere around the world. You guys are going to form, you're going to stand for the Sikhs to fight injustice. And then towards the end of Guru Gobind Singh's time, a lot of the Sikhs started wondering, right, is there going to be 11th Guru? And Guru Gobind Singh Ji said, after me, there's an eternal Guru, and that's Guru Granth Sahib. So the Guru Granth Sahib is in all the Sikh temples. It's holy scriptures. So we believe that is our eternal Guru, but beautifully decentralized, right? It's not one leader that's a human. It's this Guru is everywhere. It's installed all around wherever there's Sikhs, there's a temple. Wherever there's a temple, the Guru is there. And it really resonates. There's a lot of parallelism here between, our history, the Sikhs, what we believe in.
Just some of those principles, some of the basic principles just seem to quite align with Bitcoin, don't they?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
You also mentioned in Prague, you were saying as well about the value of gold as well, and the importance that gold and sound money had on evolving the Sikh religion.
Yeah, so yeah, no, that's a good point. Around the time the currency was, they used gold coins and silver coins. There's not much literature on this from some of the museums I've visited. I've seen some of the coins, so yeah, there's solid evidence of currency here. You could see, like, sometimes you wonder how were the gurus you know under such horrible rulers able to fight such force, able to organize themselves and build an army and acquire weapons. They had the gold standard. There's accounts about how the Sikhs would trade in northern India, the horse trade. Horses are like, modern transportation today, planes and boats and ships and cars. In those days, it was horses. If you had a horse, that was a massive thing. And so Sikhs would do a lot of trading with, the northern countries above India, Afghanistan, and some of the horses I think came from China as well. And the currency, it was gold coins, right? And it was those gold coins it freed the Sikhs to fight for something that's bigger than themselves. And what do we have today? We're too busy fighting to survive
Yeah.
a day.
Or fighting other countries over things that we're not really sure what we're fighting about.
Yeah, it's just so much injustice. You got the state who they're talking about, how they're going to how they're going to increase taxes, how they're running out of money, how, all of this is going to impact welfare. And then they're spending billions on, artillery and sending it to Ukraine. And it's like, you can't say one thing and do the other. So nothing's really changed since COVID. And Bitcoin's making new all-time highs, right? And there comes a point where you have to stop what you're doing and you've got to really open your mind and ask questions, and embark on this journey. And
Do you think your journey's evolving and changing though, Nav? As in, it does sound like your first foray into Bitcoin was as an investment, and then the old cliche of number go up, right? It was, what's the best thing I can put my fiat into to grow and give me more fiat? Is it Amazon? Is it, Nvidia? Is it MicroStrategy? And then that leads you a bit into Bitcoin. Do you think that as you've gone further down the rabbit hole, that aspect of buying Bitcoin is being enhanced by the freedom money, the possible impact on reducing war, energy saving, all those kind of things? Or would you say it's still fundamentally, primarily number go up?
No, it's much more than number go up. It's a solution to a lot of the problems in the world. Simply by going back to the decentralization element of it, simply by taking control away from the state, right? We have a system, we have a network, right? And that in itself is powerful. We're really lucky to be alive and to be seeing the birth of this system and to see it grow, right? I'm fortunate. And like my friend said, it's the order of nature. No one can control when you're going to get involved, but when you do get involved, you're fortunate, you're really lucky. So for me, Bitcoin is liberating, right? It solves a lot of problems in your life. It's when you look at its growth rate, when I do my calculations, sometimes I come to 80%, 90%, maybe more than 100%. But then there's other people like Michael Saylor who are much more conservative, and he comes up with estimates around the 30% mark. Because I think he's projecting over a period of 10 years or 20 years. So even at those levels, right, that's disruptive, that's game over for a lot of stuff. That's like pack your bags, go home.
Treasury bonds. Who wants a treasury bond? Anyone?
Everything's finished. Everything's finished. I mean, the average person, there's so many businesses operating on thin margins, and what they're doing is they're taking loans to amplify that margin. And they're like, I just made so much running this operation. And I'm like, well, it's risk. You've taken a lot of risk to do that. And Bitcoin's returning conservatively 30% a year. So essentially, you could have just bought Bitcoin, spent time with your kids, with your family, or gone hiking, done some reading, or pursued some, meaningful work, created art, right?
Yeah.
made a we just came back from Napoli, right? And anywhere you go around the world, you look at history and it's like, why? Generally across Europe, like, it's mind blowing, isn't it? You see all these amazing architectures, and it does make you wonder, like, how did they do this? We are knocking up some pretty impressive buildings in central London, like the Shard. They do look nice, but they lack character. They lack that level of detail,
Craftsmanship.
craftsmanship. Like, where did that? That's not a manager coming over and saying, "Hey, I'm going to give you a bonus. Do this." That's autonomous work, and that autonomy is being driven from the heart. It's love, right? That when we go and see the Taj Mahal in India, that's you look at that, it's a work of wonder. Gold's importance in Sikhism. So our holiest place is in Amritsar, in Punjab, north of India, the Golden Temple. So after the Guru, shortly after, we had a leader by the name of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. This guy had so much wealth. He did so much for Punjab. It was unbelievable. He was an incredible leader, and he donated a lot of gold to be melted and poured over the temple. So when you Google the Golden Temple, you'll see a gold temple, and that was, probably because of the gold standard. If we had a fiat system then, I think it would have been difficult. So it's amazing how all these things interrelate together, and how they all come together. And then there's Bitcoin. There is gold as well. Look, I think gold is great. It's going to protect people against inflation. Land is going to protect people against inflation. Houses will. There is a limited supply. But you could always mine more. You could always build more. But with Bitcoin, I was listening to Jack Mallers' talk from last year, and I had to listen to it like 4 times. It was incredible. And he was talking about how, so there's maximum 21 million Bitcoins, and most of the coins have been mined. The remaining coins are going to take X number of years to mine.
Yeah,
So the first question sorry?
It's about 100 odd years, I think.
100 odd years, yeah. So the first question that comes to one's mind is, what if we have all the energy in the world, right, to mine everything in the next year? Then what? Well, guess what? You can't do it. Because Satoshi, the creator of Bitcoin, he implemented a rule that a block can only be mined every 10 minutes. So he had to invent time in the digital world. So we've got time in the physical world, in the atomic world, and then we got the digital world, and he had to invent time, as that was his invention. He slowed time down to limit the mining to every 10 minutes, right? So essentially, if we want more Bitcoin, if we want to mine more, we have to solve time travel. That's the crazy thing about, and you know what? It's almost like Satoshi's incentivizing us. Guys, let's solve time travel. Do it. Let's make the world a better place. Here's the network. If you can solve time travel, you'll get all the Bitcoins. He's incentivizing us to really, really get down and solve the big. Going back to my point about we call it the risk-free rate, the kind of Michael Saylor's 30, assuming a 30% conservative, 30% return over the next 10, 20 years. It's and this is where it beautifully ties in to Austrian economics, right? Austrian economics is like, don't worry, leave it to the free market. Bitcoin is the perfect free market, right? It's borderless. There's no concept of countries. There's no concept of, this is going back to what Jim Rogers was talking about when we was traveling around the world and looking for markets and countries to invest in. Well, Bitcoin is the global market. There are no borders. There are no FX conversions, right? There's no friction.
Yeah, and no barriers. You don't need to get someone to agree that you can buy it. You just need a mobile phone and an internet access. That's it.
That's essentially all you need. It doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care whether you're male or female. It doesn't care about your caste. Doesn't care about your creed. See how it's all tying back to not just the Sikh principles, but many other beliefs and faiths. Even if you don't have a faith, this is like human
Common
nature.
decency. Yeah, it's common decency, isn't it?
Decency, yeah.
Yeah. It's like why should the richest people have access to, like, let's use the analogy of like Amazon or Apple, you know, the amount of people that got into seed rounds and knowing this was going to go somewhere, so got really cheap stock and made millions or billions off the back of it, where the public might have wanted to do that, but they had zero opportunity. With Bitcoin, there's only two ways you can get Bitcoin. You buy it from someone that's willing to sell it, or you try and mine it. That's it. You can't, there's no other way to do it. And, you know, if Jeff Bezos decides to buy $1 billion worth of Bitcoin tomorrow, he's got to pay the same price as a billion people buying $1 worth. You know, it's the it's the same thing. He needs someone to sell it to him in the same way everyone else does.
It's the perfect free market. And when we look ahead at the future and you look at how technology is moving and the pattern of progress, there are no borders.
What do you think is the most jarring thing for people who don't understand or are really skeptical about Bitcoin?
In the end, the way things are going, people are going to be forced into it, right? Like you're just going to be carrying on your everyday duties and you're on the Bitcoin standard, right? That's inevitable. That's going to happen. Before that happened, there's jokers like me stumbling on Bitcoin and going down rabbit holes and figuring it out before that ultimately happens. So that's what I see, a borderless world which is fruitful, a perfect free market, right? And when I say free market, I mean when there's an invention, when there's progress. Let's talk about AI. There's a lot of progress happening in AI, right? Incredible amounts. And, you know, from the start of this podcast to where we are now, there's been a lot of progress. We just don't know, right? That's how much progress is happening. And in about 6 months' time, the progress is going to be increasing exponentially on a day-to-day basis, possibly even every hour, right? The problem with all of this is, I like progress. I love it, right? We're not seeing the benefits because we're not on a free market, right? We're in a state-controlled economy where there's fiat monetary system, where there's a lot of money printing. So there's a lot of misallocation of capital. Then you've got, if that's the roots of everything, which is kind of corrupt, of course there's going to be corruption down the line. Of course the CEO of social media companies are going to be saying one thing and then doing another, right? And reaping the full rewards of AI and not allowing them to trickle down to us. But in a free market, that doesn't exist. All this advancement in AI should be hitting our energy bill, should be falling, right? It should be reducing the cost of construction and housing, right? It should be making our life easier in many ways. It should be reducing the cost of education, but it's not.
I guess it is if you're on a Bitcoin standard, but
Yeah,
but we're not as a country.
it's great for people who get on the Bitcoin standard, but we still have the problem, right? And as long as we have this problem, you know, there's going to be civil strife. There's going to be riots. There's going to be dissatisfied people, and they're going to make it difficult for everyone. So we really need more and more people to. I'm not saying people should get into it and buy it. I just want people to ask questions. You know, I only started asking questions last year, a couple of years ago. I wish I'd asked questions before that, but, you know.
I think that's partly why adoption hasn't been even faster, is because generally Bitcoiners don't say, trust me, bro, go and buy some, put your house on it. You know, they're kind of like, well, I believe in it. Maybe buy a little bit and then do some research and you might find you want to buy a bit more. But the whole thing is, it's do your own research. Don't trust me. I didn't trust anyone. I did my own. I spent the time. I researched it. if we're looking at it purely as an investment, which I know we're not, but with the lens of an investment, there aren't many where the people that are promoting that investment say, I'm not going to actually tell you a whole load of stuff. You need to go away and find out for yourself. It's rare. I can't think of any other investment that does that. So many of them are, you can't find out things about it, but you trust that, that IFA who tells you that you should be buying a global equity fund, and okay, I'll put my life savings into that.
Yeah, there's and it's understandable. It's a new invention, new technology, but it's disruptive. And the way I see it is, the internet was disruptive. A lot of physical retail stores had to close down. It was sad. It was sad to see the decline of the high street, right?
And even on that, Nav, the amount of people, even people that embraced the internet and valued it, would have probably still said, yeah, but you're never going to buy pizza on the internet. You're never going to watch a football game on the internet. You're never going to insert literally everything that now everyone does on the internet. So even when these technologies come along, the general public look at such a narrow scope of what that technology could deliver, because they can't comprehend what it can do. And you can't with Bitcoin. It's bonkers when you first find, well, what do you mean it's going to replace 180 currencies globally? Don't talk stupid. How could it ever do that? No one's going to buy stuff in Bitcoin, are they? Because you have to, as you say, you've got to find that moment in time where suddenly something clicks for you, and you find your way in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm the kind of crazy person. I've stopped a few people. I've asked them. I had a painter over, and just asked him, "So, are you into crypto? Are you into Bitcoin?" Generally, feel here in the UK that people are looking at the price of Bitcoin and thinking it's too late. So, what are they doing? They're buying Ethereum. They're buying Solana. No,
don't depress me. We've had such a lovely conversation, then you go and spoil it.
And that, I have to say this because I thought the same last year. I thought it's too expensive, and then I realized, hang on, if everyone's thinking the same, we're still early. We're still contrarian. So maybe it makes sense to at least ask more questions and learn more about this amazing invention that Satoshi created. And, it gives us hope, right? When I look into the future, I envision a borderless world. I envision a perfect free market. Bitcoin is in pole position to deliver that. That gives me hope. I understand AI to the extent that the very nature of AI is very deflationary, right? If it's outside of the control of the state, right? Now, the state has done a great job in convincing us all that deflation is bad for us, right? Which is why they target a 2% inflation rate. Nobody questions that. But the truth is, deflation's good for us. Lower groceries are good for us. Lower energy prices are good for us. Lower cost of cars is good for us. Lower cost of everything is good for us, right? But it's not good for the government, right? Because if there's deflation, their debt becomes unpayable. So we now understand, once you understand their game plan, we can start to live our life accordingly. And that realization comes through an appreciation of Austrian economics, because there's a lot of people who are still stuck in and for good reasons, they've got a socialist mind. They've got 100 reasons why they believe,
Well, and it's trust, isn't it? I mean, we've all grown up in the systems that we've got right now, and our parents did, and there's no inherent reason for most people to really question and challenge that, particularly in this country, because right now I know things are getting tougher for a lot of people, but the majority of people, let's say, aren't really struggling. Things are a bit tougher, but they're still putting food on the table, they're still having a holiday, they're still driving a car. In countries where things are tougher and inflation is even more pernicious and really stifling people's ability to live their life, those people are finding Bitcoin, or even as a stepping stone, maybe they're converting their currency into USDT as a stable coin, which is then leading them to on whatever that platform is, they might also see Bitcoin. And so there's ways people are finding it. But yeah, in this country and in America, the significant majority of people still think that they don't need it. It's just, it's tech bro money and they're too late anyway.
You've got the god of finance and investing, Warren Buffett.
He's so old school though. Like Warren Buffett still hasn't, like he's sitting on all that cash, and you think, well, why are you sitting on all that cash, Warren? You could buy a whole ton of Bitcoin with that.
He's of the. You're right. He's of a different generation. If Warren Buffett was young today, God knows what he'd be doing. He'd be all
Jack
over it.
Mallers. He'd be
Yeah.
Jack Mallers. That's who he'd be.
Yeah, probably. He'd be all over AI. He'd be looking into Bitcoin. But you know, you can't. This is the thing. We can't look up to them and expect them to have the answers, and that's a problem as well. You know, I was looking up at them and had to hear them say all sorts of things like, you know, like it being rat poison.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, they
Yeah.
could have just said we haven't had time to look into
I don't know
it.
anything about it. It's not
Yeah.
it's not anything that interests me. I don't know anything
Yeah.
about it. Don't ask me
Yeah.
a question. And that's another good reflection, is that so many people who literally know nothing about it still express an opinion about it, and that's just a ridiculous thing to do. You know, if you ask me what's my view on, I don't know, make something up, on the latest brain surgeon technique, I'd be like, well, I don't know. I don't know anything about brain surgery. So I'm not going to try and answer a question I know nothing about. And yet people, because they're so entrenched in our current system, and it might be Bitcoin's threatening them, or there's a level of uncomfortable feeling around, there's this thing that they don't know anything about, that they can just throw shade at it.
There's a lot, and I think, like you said, there's a lot of people who don't need it, right?
Or think they don't.
They think they don't. I think the world needs it. I mean, this is the thing. There's people who are comfortable, right? High energy costs, high mortgage rates are not biting them, right?
Yeah, not yet.
They're cruising, right? They haven't got the time. They don't care, right? They don't want to know it. They don't need to know it. That's a major reason as well. I think, you know, a lot of individuals' journey into Bitcoin is through a pain point, you know, and it's that pain point that makes one ask a question, observe, look outside. What is this? You know, let's find out more. Let's go to Prague. There's a big, let's meet Gary, right? Who's kindly asked me to come on the podcast. You know, it's these sort of things. It's being receptive. And generally, there's something that I have to say about the community. Like a lot of the people I met in Prague, I've been to a couple of other meetups in central London. People are really warm, welcoming, and friendly. It's amazing. We've been to conferences and in the city. A few months ago, I was at a metals conference in London. Everyone's suited and booted. It's really hard to make connections, right? It's just a kind of a very different vibe. But you know, the Bitcoin community is different. They genuinely want their view is bigger, right? They're looking at humanity has to succeed, right? The world has to succeed. That's the single most important thing, right? Whereas everywhere else,
benefit of Bitcoin, isn't it? When Bitcoin succeeds, we all succeed.
we all succeed.
It's not. I'm not trying to gain at your expense. We're all trying to win together.
Yeah.
There's certainly a good bunch of Bitcoiners in Bury St Edmunds. So if you ever come up this way, you'd be more than welcome at all of our meetups. And
oh no, thank you for the invitation. I'll be there. I need to get the ticket. Do you know what? I really hope more and more people find out about it, and that's what it's an incredible journey. You know, Prague was awesome. I'm looking forward to this event in Bury St Edmunds as well, and you know, just following all of you guys, your journey.
There's a good group of people in Bury St Edmunds that are passionate about Bitcoin and passionate about our town, and we truly believe that by Bury St Edmunds embracing more Bitcoin, Bury St Edmunds will become a better place to live. So that's the plan.
Would you say it's a bit of a hub for Bitcoin?
Maybe in my house, but I don't. I think it's what works well about Bury St Edmunds is geographically, it's easier for people from, say, Cambridge Hertfordshire, Norwich, Ipswich, and some of those bigger conurbations to it's about an hour away for a lot of people. And we do pretty well with some of the meetups. Hence, me and Jace that I'm organising this conference with, in the end, well, funnily enough, I was on a Spaces where Pete McCormack was saying something that you alluded to earlier in the context of the Sikh religion, which is we need to take action. We can't just sit back and wait for things to happen and hope everything's going to be okay, because it might not be. So we need to take action ourselves. And it was after that Spaces, I just said, fuck it, I'm going to start a podcast. I don't know the first thing about it, but I'm going to start a podcast. And I said to Jace, who founded in 2022, he did the first meetups in Bury St Edmunds. I just said to him, Jace, we need to do a conference, because if we don't do it, who else is going to do it? So, and it's been amazing. As you say, Bitcoiners are generous people with their time and energy. And we've got an amazing list of speakers who are all like excited to come and contribute. So yeah, I'm really excited about it.
That sounds really, really exciting. It's great work that you're doing. Keep it up, Gary. Really, really good. Really good. We should organize a football match with get some Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Well,
I'll get to wear this old top again.
For anyone listening and not watching, Nav's wearing a Liverpool shirt, which is slightly jarring because I'm an Arsenal fan. But we haven't argued yet, so hopefully it continues that way.
It's okay. It could have got rough, but thankfully we agree on one thing, and that is Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. Last question I ask all my guests, Nav, is what's one belief you held before Bitcoin that you've completely changed your mind about?
Just have an open mind. Be prepared to be proved wrong. That's it.
Yeah, I like it. That's good.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to reach out to you, where's the best place to find you?
It's difficult to find me. No, that's a joke. I'm on x.com quite a bit. You can find me under the name of Bastiat Research. The reason I called it Bastiat Research is, Frederick Bastiat is a famous Austrian economist from France. I've read a couple of his books. Brilliant. Really good. So yeah, that's how people can find me. Bastiat Research.
Great. I'll put the links in the show notes so anyone can find you there. Right. Well, it's been really great spending a bit more time with you than we got to spend in Prague, and just finding out a bit more about your story. I'm sure the people that listen will enjoy listening too, Nav. So it's great to meet you.
Thank you, Gary. It was a real pleasure. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.